Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. This is your, I like to say, genial host, Idris Kamisa, on the program Inspirate Life. And what we do in this program is we talk about issues in the community, and our aim is to heal, to inspire people, so that when you sit at home, relax in your armchair or whatever, that you are reflecting on who you are, what your purpose is, and hopefully, perhaps one of the guests in the program might inspire you to do great things so that, inshallah, you leave a wonderful legacy. So today, it's such a joy that I'm going to interact with a dear, dear friend of mine, like a brother to me, Anwar Suruti. Assalamu alaikum, Anwar.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for inviting me to your program. It's always a pleasure to interact with you.
Alhamdulillah. Anwar, one of the questions in my mind is, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this question. Because there are many people who watch the program and look at life. We sit back, we're very judgmental, we are not involved in making a difference to people around us, Muslims or otherwise. So what I want to ask you at the very beginning, in your own mind, in terms of your own understanding, what has been the contribution of Muslims to this democracy, to this country of ours? And the second part, I want to put it out there to you, is what should we be doing as Muslims now in terms of what should be our contribution?
No, thank you very much. And I think I'm glad you've raised this issue here. This is kind of impromptu, free session, and I'm glad it's taking that particular form. Well, look, let's recognize firstly the enormous contribution by Muslims in our democratic dispensation. The first Minister of Justice, for example, was a Muslim, Dala Abdullah Umar, a very competent person, but who spent his entire life dedicated to bringing about transformation, working towards the liberation of our people, working towards social cohesion, and representing the best amongst us. The first Chief Justice in this country after 1994 was Ismail Muhammad. Again, extremely hardworking, committed, having represented just about all and sundry in terms of political heads, whether it's the Sisulus, Albertina Sisulu, Dr. Jassad, just about everybody who matters. And extremely competent and dedicated. So that's in the political scene. Of course, there are other actors who played a very, very important role in our political dispensation. You have Wali Musa, who was quite an expert in constitutional dispensation, constitutional making. He played an enormous role, and various members of parliament have contributed one way or the other in bringing about a democratic, constitutional democracy in our country. So that's the one part, that's the political terrain. But what it says to us at that time is that Muslims were able to make a difference because they participated in the mainstream of the political arena. And I know you're going to be tempted to say, but aren't Muslims being marginalized? Aren't Indians being marginalized, or minority groups being marginalized? We'll discuss that a little later. The important thing out here is if you're given the opportunity to represent your country, recognizing that Muslims are a minority, small minority, maybe 2%, 3%, and at best 4% currently. But they're a small minority. And there was an argument at that time that Muslims were indeed overrepresented, whether it's in parliament, whether it's in the legislatures, or in other facets of government. And what was certainly very critical at that time is that Muslims who represented the broader community, not the minority community, the broader South African community, had the competence, the ability, the will, the dedication, this unstinting, selfless commitment towards change. That meant that they were recognized for their contribution. And if you look at the past 3 odd years of our democracy, not one single Muslim minister or MP has been found wanting in terms of integrity and in terms of his or her upright conduct. So that's from the one perspective. That's a political perspective. So Muslims played a very, very important role in the constitution making process, in bringing about political and social change in the country, and also in governance, because they also were in the executive of the country. At another level, at the judicial level, because there are three arms of state, Ismail Muhammad just was incredible. He was miles ahead of his peers, miles ahead of his peers. And, I just heard yesterday Quraysh, I'm saying Quraysh, another close friend of mine, because I'm speaking about Ismail Muhammad, by the way, he's a co-author with me on a biography on Ismail Muhammad.
In fact, whilst you're talking about him, I know he was incredible intellectually, right?
Yes, he was.
In terms of his time. But is there one or two personal anecdotes about him that is illuminating,
About Quraysh himself? Well, it's certainly, well, he was a close friend. We were together in school, we were together in university.
I'm talking about Ismail Muhammad.
Oh, Ismail Muhammad. Ismail Muhammad was a brilliant advocate, number one. I mean, he everybody feared him. He was the first black senior counsel in South Africa. In 1974, already, he was conferred silk. That was just unusual in a South African legal terrain. The only other person who achieved silk, or Queen's Counsel as that was then called, or Senior Counsel as it's currently termed, was Dikgang Moseneke. And that was in 1992 or 1993. Ismail Muhammad served as a judge of appeal in Lesotho, in Swaziland, in Botswana, and he was the Chief Justice in Namibia. There is a bust of Ismail Muhammad in Namibia because he was one of the co-writers of the constitution in Namibia. In fact, we drew inspiration from the constitution in Namibia. And if anybody promoted and fulfilled the aspirations of a people in terms of human rights, it was Ismail Muhammad. In the judiciary, I mean, he surpassed everybody intellectually, and he's recognized by all and sundry. But there's something very special about Ismail Muhammad. And I was saying to you that yesterday I heard or listened to a clip on Dr. Imtiaz Sooliman, brilliant philanthropist, a great Muslim, and incredibly wonderful organizer and compassionate, kind, and all the attributes and qualities that they have. But in his speech, that was on Mandela Day, he said something that Ismail Muhammad had said very long ago. He said human dignity is at the core of our being. In other words, to recognize and to elevate and promote and fulfill a person's dignity and self-respect and self-worth is at the heart of everything. Second, Ismail Muhammad was completely committed to non-racialism. And that is the message that comes again from Dr. Sooliman. The third is Ismail Muhammad said that there is something that we share across the globe, a shared humanity. And once we recognize this inherent worth, this innate being, this similarity, equality amongst all human beings, inherently having dignity, then we are able to shape our actions and our beliefs accordingly. So this shared humanity is what Ismail Muhammad promoted. And quite interestingly, when I heard Dr. Sooliman speak, he spoke about a shared humanity. So whether you're in Bosnia, whether you're in Somalia, or anywhere else, it's about working and supporting and assisting human beings. And that was quite central and pivotal to Ismail Muhammad's vision. And quite interestingly, and it's in his speeches and it's in the book that we co-authored, we've incorporated his speeches. He speaks about the element of spirituality. He says without spirituality, even if you are brilliant, even if you have competent, there is a void, there is something that's lacking. And what he really, and he gave the example of Maulana Azad, who was a freedom fighter in India, but who was a spiritual leader. And he brought forth not only his intellectual ability and his resilience in terms of his struggle for freedom, but also the element of spirituality, which made him whole. And Ismail Muhammad believed in that. And we listened to Dr. Sooliman. Some 20 years, more than 20 years thereafter, saying precisely the same thing. So those key elements that was raised by Ismail Muhammad are in fact affirmed and endorsed by Dr. Suleiman. I'm not suggesting that he's copying, but I'm saying there is a similarity in terms of it. And both of them are remarkable human beings. So Ismail Muhammad was quite an unusual person, but very, very interestingly. And you ask me, what is the role of a Muslim? He was regarded as...
Can we come back to
Yes.
that? Time is going so
I'm
fast.
so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't give you an opportunity.
No,
Yes.
it's fine. No, I think we must have our own channel.
Yeah, precisely. No,
So
Idris,
there we have
haven't
it, beloved brothers and sisters. We are speaking about the contribution of Muslims. We have chosen a few individuals, and it's incredible the kind of contribution they have made, and they left a legacy. And when we come back after this break, we're going to talk about us who are still here around. What should we be doing differently also? Jazakumullah, and we'll be back immediately after this break. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I'm happy to be back. Are you happy to be back? Inshallah, I pray that you are. So, Anwar, you were chatting about Ismail Muhammad, and continue.
Well, let's say it. Well, let's link what he stood for to the second part of your question.
Correct.
When he addressed the Muslim community during his lifetime, he spoke about the Muslims. And he said, one of the things that we have to recognize that Muslims are, in terms of the Quranic expression, the vicegerents of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they have a special status. He also said that Muslims cannot acquiesce. They cannot be complacent and surrender to an oppressive system. In other words, the pursuit of justice and equality has to be central to their being. Because being a Muslim means that you have to have an egalitarian outlook. You've got to look beyond the individual. You have got to look at the broader collective. And the third thing that he mentioned was the elimination of poverty. To say that has to be part of your struggle. You can't have rights without socio-economic programs that would enhance the standard of living and eliminate poverty wherever possible. So that becomes a religious duty. And he said that Muslims, once democracy had arrived, some of them had the tendency to become insular. They would now back off to say, well, okay, great, we have our freedom now and we can celebrate our freedom, but we don't have to participate in this new dispensation. And he said, no, but we have a moral and religious and spiritual responsibility to do so. So that's what Ismail Muhammad said more than 20 years ago, some 25 years ago. What is the position today? It's more difficult.
Before you come to that, just a thought struck me. Yusuf Islam is well-known, Cat Stevens, right? So he said, you were chatting, he said, you know what? Muslims mustn't only support those causes that impact on them. They must also support humanitarian causes. I thought that was a very powerful statement.
Absolutely. That's a broad vision that the Muslim should have. Because, being a Muslim means that you're not confined to national boundaries, geographical boundaries.
Yes.
You're not confined to race or ethnicity or culture. It means that you are basically united in a common and shared belief. And that common and shared belief is a belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That would be the belief. But there is a moral responsibility to ensure that you contribute to the upliftment of society. Because however pious you might be, if you are not righteous and you are not committed to the pursuit of justice and equality, then your faith is not complete. And that's why the Quran itself speaks about piety and righteousness. It doesn't speak only about piety.
Correct, yes.
Because piety is a very private thing between you and your Creator. But righteousness is a very social thing. It's about your sense of justice, your sense of care and compassion, and your ability to bring about change. So that becomes a religious obligation. And how do you deal with that in these very difficult times? Yes, there has been corruption, and it's certainly, I'm as angry as everybody else. Yes, there has been incompetence. Yes, there are many errors that have been made. And I'm not suggesting that you've got to join a particular political party or that you have to be a politician. I'm suggesting that if you fulfill your role in uplifting the poorest of the poor, in bringing about change, whether it's in the education sector, whether it's in the health sector or whatever. We have the skills and ability to be able to bring about change. And whether we do so in partnership with government or independently of government, doesn't matter. The objective is to really bring about change and to show that Muslims are not insular. Muslims are magnanimous. I mean, you've got OCAP, you've got Al-Imdad, and many organizations that do wonderful work, whether it's wells where there's no water, whether it's in terms of education. South African National Zakah Fund provides bursaries to hundreds of people, and they are good people. I mean, take your Auditor General. First Auditor General was Faiki. Shaukat Faiki.
Correct, yes.
He's still serving the community and the country by serving on the South African National Zakah Fund. He doesn't need to do that. He's not dependent on that, but he continues to do so. Shaukat Muqaddam is there with him.
And I'm just an example.
I'm giving examples.
Yeah, just whilst you're talking about that, like I'm overseeing the Willerton Group's bursary fund. It's incredible, the magnanimity and number of people that are benefiting from that,
No, absolutely. They've always been magnanimous. The Lokarts, they have their foundation or trust that promotes it. The colors through OCAP. And Shiraz Ghani is there, Zainul Abidin, Kaji. There's so many people, so many personalities, that I don't want to exclude anybody, but I'm saying there are Muslims who are doing wonderful, wonderful work in bringing about change and changing the conditions of the lives of the poorest of the poor in particular. Because I think having regard to the fact that we are the most divided society in terms economically. I mean, you have the poorest on the lowest rung and those that are very affluent. And we have to recognize that our democracy has brought enormous opportunities to Muslims. And while some were affluent, many more have become much more affluent as a result of the opportunities created through democracy. Now, it doesn't mean that they have to give the money back to the state, but it simply means that they have to recognize that they have a responsibility to those who are less privileged. And whether they do so in partnership of government or independently of government, through a civic organization, through a charitable trust, whatever. The fact is that you should be able to say that my legacy is one where I have sought to make a difference. Whether indeed you would succeed in doing so, we do not know. But in the Malu bin Niyat, if your actions are judged according to intentions, and God would see that this is in the heart and the mind of the person, and if he or she is willing to bring about change, however small, to make a difference in the life of somebody else. Your talks, for example, Idris. No, I'm serious about it, about communication, the importance of communication, fidelity, etc., how to resolve conflicts within marriages. I mean, that goes to the heart of the family life. And family life is part of social life, and the state is.
Yeah, you see, Anwar, I take your point. You are saying basically we can't sit back. We need to get involved. That is our Islamic injunction. I mean, if you look what's happening around us, there's a lot of pessimism, to a point in which that people have become self-absorbed. And now with the COVID and the looting and the floods and everything else, it has impacted all psychologically on people's personalities. It has impacted on family life, a whole range of things. Now, what do you say to that individual who says, you know what, I had enough, I'm sorry, I'm going to look after myself, my sanity, my home, my health, my wealth?
Well, the question is whether he or she would find fulfillment in that. I just feel that the people who are most fulfilled are the people who serve. And they do so not to enrich themselves, but more to take care of others, because that in itself is fulfilling. I think to really become insular is not the solution. If you talk about diversity and you celebrated your diversity and you do everything that opposes diversity, in the sense that you have a school that is entirely in one racial group and one religious group, does that promote diversity and multicultural behavior? Does it promote social cohesion? So the thing is, what are we doing as minority groups, and as Muslims in particular, to ensure that we become more cohesive. We must recognize, for example, in our mosque, that there are people from all different nationalities that are there, different races and nationality. What positive steps do we make to ensure that the Jamaat, the congregation, is much more cohesive, that everybody is able to participate in it, so that if at all our institutions are under attack, they are not defended by one party, but by all the congregants of that particular mosque, or congregants of a particular school, or participants of a particular school, or in the case of a business, all those who are in a business. So there, the fundamentals are there, and really and truly, I think the powerful message in the Quran has been that I've created you in different nations and tribes so that you may know each other and not despise each other, or that you may love each other. So that's a Quranic injunction. So diversity is something that we must recognize, and to say that that is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What do we do to ensure that we love or recognize or understand each other in terms of our social interaction? That to me becomes the biggest challenge.
Time is going so fast.
I'm so sorry.
No. Alhamdulillah, I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying it. In the next segment, as you were speaking, I thought about this. Do you think, as parents, people of authority, are we doing enough to educate our children about what their role is? I get the impression that you were involved with education, and that we have become individuals who are primarily concerned about academic excellence at the expense of everything else. So there we have it, our beloved brothers and sisters. Immediately after the break, and I'm talking to my brother Anwar Shruti, and I said, I'm enjoying this conversation and I like it. Assalamu alaikum. This is your genial host, Idris Kamisa, and the program Inspirate Life. And I want to remind you why we have these programs. You know what? In the end, all of us, we are mortal beings, and we're going to be in the twilight years of our life. And you say, my gosh, I should have, I could have, I did not do it. So it's an opportunity to take ownership of your life, not to be a spectator. And from what I've gathered from our guests, that there are so many things that we can do to get actively involved in the country so that we help in elevating the suffering of others and, really making the life of others beautiful, healthier, and more productive. Anwar, now, in terms of, two things. I want you to first address the parent in terms of the value systems you spoke about, initially. What are the value systems our young people need to grow up with?
Well, if we recognize, and I think it's quite a uniform acceptance of education being made up of three components. It's about knowledge, it's about skills, and it's about values. And precisely what you've raised is a concern that I have and I share with you, is that we tend to emphasize too much on knowledge and skills, and we tend to put at the periphery the importance of values. And yet that is a fundamental in terms of policy, in terms of your curriculum content, in terms of your approach to pedagogy. Now, I think more attention must be paid to this particular element, but in a very realistic way. In other words, we must basically be able to tell our children, this is the context, this is what South Africa is all about. These are the inequalities that prevail over here. We just had recently the passing away of Ibrahim. Person who spent enormous, incredible, remarkable person, right? Jasmine or Jesse Duarte, Don Matera. They spent their lives to bring about change and transformation. And why did they do so? And what do we do to honor their legacy? And it would mean that we shouldn't be complacent. We shouldn't regress or move backwards, but we should rather progress and say, how do we confront the turbulent times that we are facing, and to what extent do we make changes? Now, I'm not the pessimist, I'm the optimist, and my optimism is informed by realities, social realities from the Muslim community. If you look at, you spoke about the unrest in July, think about how the Muslims were able to galvanize support and provide not only for the Muslim community, but for the broader community, the magnanimity shown like a bright light. If you look at COVID itself and the difficulties, whether it was in terms of ventilators, whether it's in terms of medical care, and the doctors and nurses went the extra mile, we're all aware of it, we recognize it, we appreciate it. But Muslims have played a very, very important role in ensuring that that becomes a social responsibility, not an individual or family responsibility. So those are just two elements. I mean, there are many other examples. With the floods, you had much the same kind of commitment in it. So if we have these innate qualities within us, how do we sharpen them, refine them, and in my opinion, make them more public so that people understand? You know, if you're going to soften the hearts of others, not because you want to enhance your repute or reputation as a good Muslim, but in order to tell them that, look, this is the way, then there's no reason why you should not be able to say, look, this is what the Muslim community has been doing. And I imagine it would start in our schools, it should start in our homes, then our schools, and in our mosques, so that we're able to say, we could feel the vibrancy of a Muslim community in a mosque. When you are there, you know, talk about ethics, about weights, talk about honesty in your dealings, talk about compassion and generosity. Those are critical elements, because it's not only the government that is corrupt. They are individuals. And if you look at the corrupt practices, by and large, you would always find somewhere along the line there is a participant from the private sector, correct, and it doesn't have to be Muslim, but on many occasions, to our great embarrassment, there are Muslims involved. Why do we say less about those people and more about the others who are within government? Because in government too, you know, there are Muslims that are doing remarkable work. Naledi Pando, it's a woman, number one, and a Muslim. That's remarkable work. International relations, solidarity with the people of Palestine, saying that overtly. You should hear us speak to the United Nations, and speaking with so much of honesty and dignity.
Correct, yes.
Yes. Now, I mean, that is a Muslim. That is a Muslim that we should say, well, wow, how proud are we of you. And our children, there are many of our children who are doing wonderful work. And I really do believe that our women and our men, and I think our men must understand, you know, this patriarchy of theirs, to think that only Muslim men do good. That's not the truth. It's Muslim women and men that do good. And women basically have been the driver of great changes within society. So I reckon it's time for us to recognize that the community is made up of women and men, that we should affirm our women as well. And certainly we should be able to have conversations with our children about things other than movies.
You know, in fact, we tend to have a knee-jerk reaction whenever the media or some individual criticizes Islam, inverted commas, for our treatment of the woman. We would quote the Quran, we'll quote Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. But in reality, there are still pockets, institutions and groups of people that marginalize our sisters. And yet they are playing such a significant role in our community. And I think that part we cannot overemphasize.
No, absolutely. You know, I mean, you know, it doesn't mean that by affirming our women, it doesn't mean that we are telling our women to become westernized. Yeah. I mean, I've been in the education sector. We've never allowed anybody to be expelled because they wore the headscarf or they wear the hijab. That is a cultural and a religious right of expression. So Muslims, you know, it doesn't mean that if women are participating, they are deviating from the religious precepts. They do so within the framework of Islam, and I think that open-mindedness is quite important. Others, they have views, some more extreme views that say that women shouldn't even go to schools, or children shouldn't even go to schools. They shouldn't be educated in public places. They should be educated only in homes. Is that a solution? I'll leave it to the more enlightened to determine. But my view is really and truly that women have made a huge contribution. I mean, you know my wife Khadija. She was a speaker over there, but she was a mentor of all the speakers in the Northwest.
And in fact,
role,
the first university in the Muslim world was by a woman, right? So, my beloved brothers and sisters, I hope when you're listening to Anwar, you're not listening to him from a detached distance, because I think we need to confront ourselves and ask ourselves, to what extent are we perpetuating a vicious cycle, or to what extent we are contributors to our growth of our families and humanity at large. We'll be back immediately for the last segment after this break. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am back. Am I becoming your recurring nightmare? No, I hope not. Right. Yeah. Normally we like to give people a takeaway message, and there have been many that you've been giving. Now, in terms of how do we utilize the talents of young people and others in the community so that we work in a more cohesive way, that, we are in the same trajectory, same vision that we have in terms of what we are doing. And I'm reminded, there are many people in America embrace Islam when they are incarcerated. And then they realize the value of time. And when they meet a fellow brother, they do not go through the pleasantries asking, how are you? How is the family? But they will ask, what have you done for the cause? And that's the question. What are we doing for the cause,
Well, alhamdulillah, I must say that Muslims have progressed extremely well. In the education sector, they're doing remarkably well, amongst our best accountants, medical professionals, educators in academic institutions, in academia, are Muslim. So they have enormous skills and capacity, and also as entrepreneurs, obviously, that comes quite naturally to particularly the Indian Muslim, but not only the Indian Muslim, even the Muslim from Somalia or Bangladesh, they seem to have this skill. So these skills are there, they're almost latent in the community. To what extent do we utilize those skills to empower others? How do we mentor and guide and train and coach others so that those who do not have the skills would be able to develop and acquire those skills and contribute to their communities? I don't think skills should be just kept to individuals. And the Muslims are fully aware, the Indian Muslim in particular is fully aware of the gatekeeping that takes place in the different professions, whether it's in the accountancy profession, whether it's in the medical profession, etc. Gatekeeping continues to exist. Now, so many people are being excluded, particularly blacks. When I say blacks, I refer to Africans, Indians, and coloreds. Now, recognizing that what you do differently to ensure that you create broader empowerment from a private perspective, I'm not talking about broad-based economic empowerment from a government perspective, I'm talking now from a private perspective. How do you ensure that greater participation takes place? And I think there are many ways to do it. You find professions are really kept very, very tight, where they don't allow blacks to enter. And unless blacks say, listen, it's not about me alone as a professional, but it's about us as professionals who are black. We have to improve and develop some kind of partnership, some kind of mechanism that is broadly empowering. We're not going to make the kind of difference that we can. I can give you examples of such things, but they do exist where people have really empowered and contributed to the broader development of black professionals who would otherwise have been excluded from the profession, even though they had the skills. And I really think that the talent is there, the ability is there, the competency is there, the skills is there, even the values are there by and large. And it's really to tap into those beautiful resources that we have and to say how do we expand them in a way so that more people can benefit from it, especially the poorest of the poor. Because if you bring about that change, if you develop those skills, then you are developing skills for the community at large. And I think that should be the message that I would want to give to the particularly to the Indian Muslim community in South Africa, that you're well endowed, you are very, very magnanimous by and large, and most of you have your profession, most of you as professionals are value driven. Not all of you. I mean, some doctors are not as compassionate as they ought to be. Some lawyers are not as caring as one would expect to be, and some accountants are not as honest as one would expect to be. But there are many who basically serve the professions with dignity, with honesty. And I think at the heart of change and transformation and making the difference that you speak about, the cause, would be that ability to be utilized much more productively and much more broadly as an empowering mechanism to create a better society.
I think the question to us, to the viewers and to myself, to everyone, is who has benefited from you, from your life experiences,
Yes, absolutely.
That's a bottom line. There's a book, and I often cite, I like the title of the book, is Who Will Cry When You Die? And it's a beautiful subtitle, Lead Your Life in Such a Way that when you were born, you cried, people were smiling. But when you died, you were smiling and people were crying. And one of my friends, I often talk about him, may Allah grant him Jannatul Firdaus, he was an incredible activist from the UK, Fuad Nadi. And when I quoted that, he said, I'll tell you what my father told me. And he was telling me this. He said, my father said to me, my beloved son, you had no idea who would celebrate your life, but you're in complete control as to who will mourn your loss. Powerful, eh?
Very powerful.
Very deep, powerful. Very, very powerful. And I see that, this has been your theme throughout the discussion about getting involved, being active, being positive, and Muslims have made a significant contribution. They can continue to make that contribution. And if you were just, say, interacting with an individual, a young man, right?
You were young once upon a time. Yeah. Once upon a time. But you haven't lost your youthfulness, yes, Idris. You're blushing. I can't believe it.
No. I was just thinking about us. We know each other about 50 years.
Yes, a little more than that.
Yeah, you I'm 51 now. Right? Now, so how do you motivate him? That person, he's driven. I want to qualify as a doctor. I want to do this. You understand? And the school is concerned about the 100% metric results. Anything else, like the book Hard Times, all I want is facts, nothing else. You don't talk about life. It is irrelevant. How do you motivate that individual?
Well, the thing out here is because we have a value-based curriculum.
Yeah.
And that's why life orientation is a fundamental. I think one of the difficulties that we have is that nobody takes it seriously enough. Attitudes and values play a much more less meaningful role in the pursuit of academic excellence. And in as much as there's a decline in sport, so too is a decline in terms of values and attitudes. And if you look at the values, this is what you're talking about. It's just really, I need 100%. I need to do this. I need to do that. It's about the individual achieving something in order to enhance his or her opportunities in the real world. Rarely do they say, we should do this, we should collaboratively achieve this particular outcome without compromising quality in any way whatsoever. And I think that element is somehow lost. And because, do we blame government for the fact that they don't emphasize sufficiently adequately in terms of life orientation and life skills? I don't think it's government's responsibility. The curriculum is there, the opportunity is there, the need is there, and it's really for institutions and schools and homes and parents to basically recognize that important element, because if families are not value-based and institutions are not value-based, then how can society be value-based? So that has to start at home. If societies are insular, if we keep our children away from other, do not expose them to the other, how are we going to develop tolerance, understanding, appreciation of diversity, appreciation of different cultures and ethnic groups? Because we've kept them to ourselves, as if the beginning and end of our lives is within a small circle of compatriots. I think life goes beyond that. And probably it's because of a sense of insecurity, but I think largely it's because of a convenient sense of insecurity. Because you are affluent, you can afford all those things, you don't have to mingle, you don't have to do that, you feel much more secure in an environment that is known to you, and you basically build walls around yourselves, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, socially, and then you say, but what went wrong? Why is it that people are treating us so badly when they've never seen you in any other social event?
Correct, yes.
So, I mean, the masjid is an important It's important. It's the ultimate. I mean, I'm not even going to argue about that. That is a social meeting point. It has the power to bring about social change and social cohesion. To what extent are we utilizing? I think some of the mosques are doing wonderful work, and really we must thank our theologians and our Muslim leaders and trustees of the various mosques. But I always believe that we don't have the ultimate. You know, this is something. Let me perhaps tell you this. I was in the education sector, and I won't tell you in what capacity, but I was there. People say, you know what? We are feeding 80 people every month. They forget that the government is feeding 9.3 million children every single day. 9.3 million children every single day. Somehow, that 80 kids that are being fed becomes the most dominant, most magnanimous thing. And we forget about 9.3 million children that are being fed every day. The children don't have to pay for stationery. That 90% of children go to school without having to pay fees, having to pay for stationery, and receive a nutritious meal. And the infrastructure is improving. I don't know in recent times, but certainly we were doing it at the 2 state-of-the-art schools per week. But it's just that people only look for the negative. And I do believe that there are challenges, and we can improve in those, and partnerships are very, very critical. And I think the Muslims have the will, the ability, and the commitment to bring about change, and I think they will, inshallah, bring about the change that is necessary.
There you have it, Anwar. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Monologue.
No. I really enjoyed it. And the thing is, you have highlighted some individuals. You could not highlight everyone who made a significant contribution. And when you spoke, I was thinking again about Imtiaz Suleiman, that as one individual, what he has done, that he has promoted the deen of Islam without propagating it in terms of articulating it, except through his actions, right? The other important aspect is this, that you are saying that we got to get involved. It is your Islamic responsibility. And now what you're also asking for is the fact that our institutions, like the masajids, can be a little more dynamic and become the nerve center, as it were, which it has done in some cases, many cases rather, during the COVID and during the lockdown, as it were. So my beloved brothers and sisters, my earnest prayer and hope for each one of you is that Allah is pleased with your actions, that you leave a true legacy, be a person of significance, not a person of success. A person of success does things for his CV, but a person of significance, as I always say, realizes that empires are built in the hearts of people. I look forward to your feedback. Allah bless you, look after and protect you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.